Okay, everybody, let's take a look at this challenge question, please. Okay, so here's the question I asked you to do. I said sketch out the following equation. All right. Now this one involves an absolute value on the x and an absolute value on the y, so this one seems a little bit more complicated than what we've done before. But if we use the same ideas, we should be able to solve this. Okay, now here's my first step. I'm going to ask you to solve for the absolute value of y. So move everything else to the side. What do we have here? 2 take away the absolute value of x. Now, okay. Now, how can we figure this out? I've got an absolute value for y. Remember absolute values, what you can do here is a piecewise function. You can separate it, right? You have a positive piece and a negative piece. So this is what I'm going to ask you to do, okay? I'm going to ask you to rewrite this as case number 1, and I want you to do also case number 2, okay? Let's make y bigger or equal to 0 for one case, less than 0 for another one. Not enough, okay? All right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, how do we solve this? Okay, if y is greater or equal to 0, and I'm going to take my equation in blue, what do I replace the absolute value of y with? Positive y or negative y? Positive y, good. Okay, so this is what we have. Okay, now for case number 2, what would I replace that absolute value of y with? What would it be in this case if y is less than 0? Negative y, good. All right, now you see how we have two equations, one in red, one in green. You see how both of those equations also has an absolute value? So guess what? We have to break it up again into two different cases. So now what I'm going to say is let's try case number, I'll say case number 1A, and I'll do case number 1B. Okay? Let's do this one. Case 1A is when x is greater or equal to 0. Case 1B is when x is less than 0. Okay? And I'm going to ask you now to rewrite these equations for me as well. What do we get for case 1A? When x is greater than 0, what does the absolute value become? Just positive. So we'll leave it like this. Okay, y equals to 2 minus x. Now, how about the one in 1b? What does the absolute value there become? Negative. So y equals to 2 minus negative x, or 2 plus x. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's see if you can actually sketch out these two equations for me. Let's do 1a first of all, as a quick sketch. What does the equation y equals to 2 minus x look like, dear friends? Describe it to me. What's the y-intercept? 2. What's the slope? Negative 1. So it goes which way? Upward sloping or downward sloping? Downward. Whee! Okay. Now, be careful. This is not the actual correct graph for case number 1a. Because what did I say for case 1a's domain? X has to be greater than or equal to 0. So which part should I get rid of? Everything that's left of that. So I guess I should be like, oops, let's erase. Everything should be greater than 0 like this. Now, is that correct? Technically not, because this is case 1a. The restriction is x must be greater than or equal to 0, but there's also something else from case number 1. Y also has to be greater than 0. So I don't want that whole line. I only want, let me erase, only this part right here. Okay? Stop. That's it. Okay? Now, you graph out case 1b for me, please. Okay? Do it separately. Okay, we'll do it separately. X, then y. How do you describe this line? Y equals to 2 plus x. What's the y-intercept again? 2. What's the slope? 1 to the right, 1 up. Right, so you're going this. Wait a minute, that's not right because of my domain here. X has to be less than 0. Oops, I made the same mistake. So I guess it should be down this way. Is that the correct answer? No, because once again, y is greater or equal to 0. So oops, erase that. So what should I have? Just this point right here. And this point here is -2. Okay? Huh. And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to do the same thing now for case number 2. So once again, we have an absolute value. So I'm going to ask you to split this up into 2 separate cases. Maybe before I even do that, I'm just going to say, nah, let's not. Let's just go ahead and do it. Case number 2a. In this case, where x is greater or equal to 0. And I'll say case number 2b, where x is less than 0. Okay? Yes. All right. So what do we have here now? Well, notice I'm going to replace the absolute value of x with something. In this case, I'm just going to keep it positive since x is greater than 0. In the other case over here, I'm going to replace the absolute value of x with something that's negative since x is less than 0. And ladies and gentlemen, look at what we get as our equations. Okay? If I divide everything by -1 over here, I get y equals to, and I'm going to switch the signs, y equals x minus 2. Okay? And if I divide everything over here by -1, I get positive y, and this becomes, I believe, -2, and this would become minus x. All right? So ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to ask you to do now is, let's see if you can sketch out these two parts, and then afterwards, I'm going to ask you to put them all together. Okay? So go ahead and try this on your own right now really quickly. See if you can sketch these two parts, please. A is the equation x minus 2, so right down here, and then upward sloping. Oops, wait a minute, that's wrong, because it has to be bigger or equal to 0, so I should start on the right of the y-axis. Oh, wait a minute, that's still wrong, because look, case 2 is y is less than 0, so all we have is just this portion right here. And then last but not least, this part, I think we get just this portion right there. So what happens when you put them all together? Put together. Yeah. You get that lovely diamond shape. Okay. Now, can you also tell me the intercepts? This should be 2. This should be -2, -2, 2. There's your final answer. Okay. I'll stop this.